Good evening. It's so exciting to see like my favorite people all in the same room. So thank you so much for coming. What I want to do is start off with talking about the Shauna Foundation, which is sponsoring Nanaya and I tonight. It's a 501c arts nonprofit since 2015, named for Shauna E. Shea, who passed away at the age of 16. We continue this work in her memory. Our mission. We believe the arts and education are essential to creating a vibrant, healthy community and world. The mission of the Shauna Foundation is to equitably promote and support students through scholarship and showcase artists in filmmaking, performance arts, poetry, and other creative endeavors with a focus on underrepresented communities. The Library Poetry Tour is a part of our foundation's programs that also include local scholarships, the Women in Film Fellowship, 3 film festivals, the Creating Dangerously podcast, and more. We'd like to thank our sponsors, the Mass Cultural Council, the Milford Cultural Council, and the Uxbridge Cultural Council, along with our gratitude for the Milford Public Library for hosting this event. I would also like to thank the Executive Director of the Shauna Foundation, Skip Shea, who's here with us tonight, and the Board President, Anna Chinapi. Anna and I met a few months ago while we were doing some networking at my current job, which is now in the mental health field, and we ended up talking everything poetry. Skip and Anna are 2 courageous and compassionate people who have created this wholehearted foundation to lift up our local communities. I am grateful for this opportunity to serve as the new Poetry Program Director, and therefore I'd also like to thank Tony Brown, the former Poetry Program Director.
Hello, everyone. This wonderful woman next to me is Miss Kathy Stoker. I had the pleasure and honor of being one of her classmates, and she has since become one of the closest people in my life, and I am so grateful for her. To be able to even be presented with this opportunity is amazing, so thank you.
And then I'd like to introduce you to Nanaya, who is a former student, as she said. We've known each other for over 10 years, along with our librarian and friend extraordinaire, Anita Salucci. We both first taught and coached Nanaya's older brother, Kofi, and years later we got to teach Nanaya, and it's so great to see so many of you here who have also taught Nanaya. And Nanaya is now in college, ready to earn her associate's degree in May. And I would like to add that she is a loving, strong, smart, funny, beautiful human being who I so enjoy going to poetry readings with. And tonight's a dream for us to do this and lead together. So feel free to snap, clap, or cheer in your own way. We will be going back and forth reading our own original poetry. I'm going to read a poem from someone else I know, and then we're going to perform one together. And then we will leave room for questions at the end, and we will finish by 8. All right, so Nanaya is going to go first.
Hello, everyone. All right, so this poem is called My Femininity in Blackness, and I wrote this during a time where everything was kind of a mess in our world. Everyone who, lived through the pandemic knows that there are many things happening not only within our country but within our community, and I got the opportunity to speak at a vigil in 2020, and this poem is inspired by that. My femininity and blackness are the 2 things I love about myself and the 2 things that America hates. With my thick and curly hair and a body with curves in unimaginable places, I can give you whiplash. I'm a threat. My femininity goes unnoticed because of the broad shoulders passed down by the level-headed women in my ancestry. My blackness is a threat. The color of my skin, like the soil, in which things have learned to bloom, grow, and flourish. My femininity and blackness are my superpower. My femininity and blackness help me sympathize, empathize. My femininity and blackness can help me shine even when a storm is near. My smile Can make a storm pass through faster than you can say hello. With box braids, cornrows, and afros, I wreak havoc with my volume. My femininity and blackness make me me. Who gives a fuck if you don't like it? I do.
So my first poem is called AAA Tow Truck Driver, and I'm comparing myself as a teacher to that profession. I have taught students for 29 years. Often I feel more like a AAA auto service repair person than an English teacher. As I tow my students to the next rest stop, service area, or exit on their life as a highway journey. I am sometimes able to educate students on car maintenance, but often they don't like to read the manual. I try to motivate them to keep their engines tuned up and fueled, but often they are tired, run down, and in need of a rest. They drive miles and miles with their red engine light on, speeding, and then wondering why they break down. I can talk in signs, slow down, yield, brake for pedestrians. And some listen while others turn up their radio, turn on their blinker, and turn away. Fortunately, there are many who have a desire to make it to their next destination. They learn, wear your seatbelt, travel with a map, call for help when needed. So for now, I will keep driving my tow truck, hoping to help students make it one exit at a time down the open highway of life.
Alrighty, this next poem is going to be called Self-Love. Self-love. That is a language I am still learning. I look at the pretty girls in my second grade class and wonder why their crushes liked them back, but mine never did. Wonder why my skin was the color of soil, which things have learned to bloom, grow, and flourish, yet nothing around me was green. It was gray. It was dark. I couldn't see the light ahead. I couldn't find a way out without losing myself in the process. I didn't know how to crawl out of the dark and into the light. But self-love is not a one-way street. It is hard and messy and constant second-guessing even when you think you're past it. Self-love is a language that I will continue to learn until I am fluent.
So many of you know last year I pivoted from teaching many years at Westboro High School and started a job for the school year at MCI Norfolk Men's Medium Security Prison. And it was an amazing experience working with my students. They were mostly male, well, they were all males, ages 22 to 72. And I was helping prepare them to take the HiSET, which is the GED, high school equivalency exam. And what I learned a lot from these individuals, but often the story I kept hearing over and over again was that the individual grew up in a city in Massachusetts, impoverished, usually a single parent family, and many of these boys at the time had to drop out of school in middle school, often to work at Market Basket full-time, only to find that you can't pay rent off of a full-time job at Market Basket. So I think of the story in which one individual told me that then he had to start stealing change from cars. But then that wasn't enough with the Market Basket and the change. So then he started selling marijuana, dealing marijuana, and making a little bit more money to help his family. And then he was encouraged to join a gang. And I say encouraged, but it was more like a forced decision at that point. And so he joined a gang. And so then he was in the gang life and dealing drugs, but really trying to support his family. And as many of the guys would say to me, this is not what we wanted. Many of the guys would say, we wish we were doing the Dungeons and Dragons after school club where the other kids, might have been able to in middle school and then in high school, or play a sport, etc. And so then it became, between the gangs, I'm either going to kill you or you're going to kill me. And so one of us goes to the grave and one of us goes to prison, and usually over sentenced, etc. So the men in front of me would be the first to hold themselves accountable. And I really believe it's my opportunity to voice and give voice to my former students and to humanize them. That when we are sentenced in our system, our freedom is taken away, but our humanity shouldn't be. So I wrote this poem for my students when I was teaching in prison. And because the Department of Corrections says in theory rehabilitation is the way to go, it isn't necessarily practiced. And so I wasn't allowed to necessarily give the poem to them, but I did anyway anonymously. So this one is called Perception is Not Reality. I am constantly told that you are predators, murderers, and manipulators. However, that simply is not true. Every day I see you. You are poets, academics, artists, and activists. I am often told that you are violent, reactive, scary, and yet you have been nothing but kind, self-aware, and strong. So who really are the predators behind the wall? What I see and what I know. You are beautiful human beings worthy of love and belonging. You are intelligent thinkers and feeling beings. You are students of higher education and you are teachers of life. You are empathetic, funny, fun, lovable, and loving. You are leaders, teammates, and individuals. You are courageous, wholehearted, and dignified. You walk through these halls with integrity and your heads held high. Your determination is commendable, respectable, and honorable. No one can take away your righteous minds and courageous hearts. You are amazing, and please don't ever forget that. And then just to give you a little bit more insight, so I gave these out to my students, each a copy, and it didn't have my name on it. And then within the next days, apparently it went viral in the prison. And what I mean by that is that guys were showing the poems to other guys, and then I had people coming into my classroom who weren't students saying, "Are you the poet lady?" And I was like, "I think so." And they said, "You know, my cellie roommate has a copy of this poem that you wrote on his wall, and I want to put one on my wall because I've been for so long told I was a monster, and this really is helping me to realize I'm not a monster." And so then the poem went viral, and that's what kind of catapulted me into writing more poems for the guys. So, all right.
All right, so this next poem is entitled The Mediocre White Guy. And it's about a story of my first open mic night. It's a story about my first open mic night and a weird experience that happened after I performed. I went to my first open mic night recently. This white guy was the last to perform, and he gave a warning before he opened his mouth to say the most vile things about women. My first thought was, how the hell is this guy married? Then this white man came up to me, talked to me about his Mount Rushmore, located in South Dakota, where 2 out of 4 other mediocre white men had slaves. Thomas Jefferson, a walking contradiction in himself. He was considered an abolitionist, yet spoke out against it. He spoke poorly on black women, relating their looks to the likes of orangutans. However, he did repeatedly rape Sally Hemings, the half-sister of his deceased wife, to breed more property for the Monticello. George Washington, the first president and the first mediocre white guy in power. As much as he was a quote-unquote trailblazer, he had horrible hygiene. The teeth pulled from his mouth were not his, but the teeth he pulled from the mouths of enslaved people. I'm getting off topic. Sorry, the mediocre white guy. It's one thing to read poetry that said vile things about women. It's another thing to relate those words to your wife, which he did. His Mount Rushmore might have included Rosa Parks, Alice Walker, Toni Morrison, and Phyllis Wheatley. I am a Black woman. I am the most unprotected person in America. I am a Black woman. I'm seen as a sex symbol and never as a symbol of power. I am a Black woman. I'm seen as a side character and never the main one. I'm a Black woman. I'm seen as loud and angry, but I'm never given the grace to be those things. I am an angry Black woman, and as you can see, I have every right to be. I am an angry Black woman because I am the most unprotected person in America. I am an angry Black woman because I'm seen as a sex symbol and never as a symbol of power. I am an angry Black woman because I'm always the side character and never the main one. I am an angry Black woman because I'm seen as loud and angry, but I'm never given the space to be those things. I am a Black woman. I am angry. I am Mount Rushmore. You'll see me, but you'll never respect me.
All right, I'm going to switch from a poem to more of a vignette or short story. It is also about my experience teaching in prison. And I will disclaim, I'll be swearing, which for those of you, especially my former students, know I don't often do. But that's part of the point of the story. It's called Sugar Plums and Motherfuckers. And I realize it might get edited out on Milford Cable. I did not have an official no cursing rule in my classroom in the medium security men's prison. I had suggested to my students that we really try to mimic a classroom and/or work setting environment in which we want to communicate effectively, using other words besides goddamn, fuck this and fuck that, shit, etc. And for the most part, on a daily basis, my students, whose ages ranged from 22 to 72, tried really hard to minimize their swearing. When I teach in public schools, I have used for years the word sugar plums, which often makes my high school students laugh. And yet, I have inevitably had students start using it, even the tough student athletes, like perhaps the quarterback of the football team. One student athlete once said to me, "Miss, it is so not cool that I said sugar plums the other day in the locker room, and the guys laughed because we all know I picked it up from your class." So when I was hired to teach incarcerated individuals how to earn their high school diploma equivalency, my high school students said before I left, "Are you really going to get your new students to say sugar plums?" I said, "I am sure going to try." Flash forward to a few months into teaching in the prison, and I was consistently using the word sugar plums instead of swearing when I was getting upset. My students would laugh and even say, "Miss Kathy, you really can swear in front of us." And I would smile back and say, "Nope, why should I start now?" There was one student in particular, we'll call him T to protect his identity. He would mutter every time he got a math problem incorrect, "Motherfucker." While the majority of my students, indeed, minimized their cursing and began to work on other forms of effective communication, our class just knew that T would continue to use the word motherfucker. And because he also resembled the actor-wrestler Dwayne Johnson, aka The Rock, none of us were going to encourage him to change his language. T worked as hard as anyone else in the class. He last attended the 8th grade almost 30 years ago, before he dropped out of school. When he passed his first high school equivalency exam with me, he shouted, "Motherfucker, I did it!" And he truly smiled for the first time. He said, "Kathy, am I feeling happy?" I said, "Yes, you are, T." He said, "I haven't felt happy in years." I said, "Well, you are worth feeling happy." He went and sat down to work on preparing for his next exam. As I was working with another student, I heard T call out my name. "Kathy." "Yes, T." "I'm feeling it again." "What, T?" "I'm feeling happy again." And I said, "T, keep right on feeling it." A few minutes later, he said, "Kathy." I said, "Yes, T. Can I make an announcement to the class?" I paused for 5 seconds as I was slightly nervous about what he was going to say, as he barely talked in class to anyone. I took a chance and said, "Sure." Well, T stood up and all the other students turned to face him. T said, "I just passed my first motherfucking test. I haven't been to school in almost 30 motherfucking years. If I can do this, then all of you motherfuckers can." The whole class erupted in cheers and daps. I felt tears in my eyes and simultaneously felt like I was watching an inspirational movie, but this was real life. A few months later, T was reading one of his journal entries to the class. He said, "This guy was full of sugar plums." The class laughed, and a classmate said, "You didn't really write sugar plums." T said, "No, I wrote shit. But Kathy likes when we say sugar plums." So I substituted sugar plums for shit. I smiled and said to myself, mission accomplished. But you and I both know that this story is more than saying sugar plums and motherfuckers. T went on to pass all 5 high school equivalency exams and graduate with his high school diploma just this past June.
This next poem is going to be entitled America. This is actually one of the first poems I've ever performed in front of people. I was able to get the opportunity to speak at a vigil in 2020, as I said before, and this is the poem I actually opened up with. America, America, America. God bless America. Yes, bless the land that was never yours to begin with. Bless the land that ancestors upon ancestors had to build up with not a second of acknowledgement. Shout out to my brothers and sisters who have been hurt by this godforsaken country. Betty Jones, Freddie Gray, Eric Gardner, Tiara Thomas, Trayvon Martin, Sandra Bland, Michael Brown, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and so many more. We are tired of shouts and cries from our kin. America, America, America. My home sweet home. My home sweet home, right? How can I feel at home when I'm the most unprotected person here? America, America, America. I am more than what you see, but you wouldn't know that because you killed me before you could find out. I don't mean physically, I mean spiritually. You killed my spirit. You chewed it up, you ripped it out, and you stomped on it. Yet I am still here. But America, America, America. God bless you.
One thing I promised my students from Norfolk was that I would be their voice. And so I promised myself when I'm doing readings that I will pick at least one poem or piece of writing that one of the guys did. So this one is called Incarcerated Slavery. And his name's Brandon. 20,058 Asians, 60,144 black and browns, 4,223 natives, and 88,731 whites. Incarcerated numbers in America. Incarcerated numbers make it easy to count the truths. The fabrication of negation has abolished 13. To see Jim Crow wearing blackface, yoking the amendments, placing 1865 in servitude, whipping the Constitution on its back, putting chains on independence, the illusion of autonomy, forcing generations to their knees. The cotton field is replaced by walls of steel. Crippled hands plucking free labor as Article 16 bleeds grapes to raisins. The incubus of this new Jim crows the lies of freedom towards the ears of those caught in conspiracy snares, of black laws and red lines, agents designed to keep slavery unconfined and alive and well. Slavery is alive and well. Broken down shacks to cells, engraved branded skins to institutional numeric pop lists, the beginning of sins has no end, but alchemized to a version of multitude, coops, clinks, cans, and pens that devalue human lives, echo cries, vibrating brick walls, accumulating noises in the form of voices to break down, disintegrate, eradicate, exterminate, mass incarceration. Slavery has a new body, form, and face, the makeover that mass incarcerates, pilfering, sodomize, and rapes to a climaxing pleasure, economical treasures that was buried in the work of the people. If all is created equal, then why do statistics claim different? Slavery is incarceration, but with participation of the whole, we can make a difference. We can make the difference. When today at the adolescent mental health program where I work, and I facilitate a couple groups, and I see one of my fellow clinicians is here, Caroline, thank you for coming. I told the students that I wanted to practice with them and get feedback from them, and also I was working with them on their stress tolerance level, because sometimes some kids struggle with attention issues, etc. And so I had been reading some of my poetry, and then I just read that one, and one of the students was like, oh my gosh, he's a really amazing poet. Like, that's the best poem you've read so far. And I was like, oh, thanks. And then thankfully another student quickly picked up on it. It was like, your poems are good too, Kathy.
All right. This is going to be my last poem, and I actually took inspiration from the book All American Boys by Jason Reynolds and Brenton Kiley. Miss Anita and I have bonded over this book a lot. And I took, I think, the first few words on the cover page and made a poem out of it. And this poem is called Movement. We move. To new places, to new scenes, we move. I see movement all around. Birds, planes, words in the mud. I see movement. There's movement in the corner store, and then everything is black. I see the movement of a policeman over a young black teen. I see movement. I see movement of the policeman raining his fist of fury over that boy. I see the movement of that boy writhing in pain. The boy is still moving, and then he is not. I see the movement of red and blue lights, the movement of what is supposed to be justice and liberty for all.
All right, so I'm going to switch gears and leave my prison poetry that I do hope will eventually, sooner than later, become a book to, again, highlight voices from behind the walls and to humanize incarcerated individuals. But I want to take us back to the pandemic. This is dated March 29th. I almost said 1920, 2020, not that old yet. This is called I Dropped My Croissant on the Floor and I Cried. This was about, I think, 2 weeks after we all went remote in the education world. And we were supposed to only go 2 weeks in theory, and then it ended up being months and months and months. And so this was just after 2 weeks how I was feeling. I woke up this morning before my family did. The quiet solitude of the house was refreshing. I made my breakfast. 2 scrambled eggs with some shredded cheese on a toasted croissant. It was the last croissant in a package of 4. We don't buy croissants too often. They feel like an exotic luxury food. I put my scrambled eggs on the toasted, decadent croissant and added a small clementine on the side. I had my steaming hot cup of green tea in my favorite mug. As I walked to the table with croissant breakfast sandwich in one hand and cup of tea in my other hand, I lost my balance. I dropped my croissant on the floor and I cried. I cried with my whole heart, looking down at the egg, croissant, clementine, and spilled tea on the floor. I cried for our Mother Earth, who is so sick and has been sick for a very long time. I cried for the thousands of people who are sick. I cried for the people who had already died. I cried for the people who are going to get sick. I took a breath in between hot tears streaming down my cheeks and gasps for breath. And then I heard the birds chirping outside as the rain gently fell on the early spring grass. I then cried harder, messier. I cried for the loved ones of people who are sick and can't touch their loved ones because they are in the nursing homes, in hospitals, in prisons, and live far away. I cried for the medical professionals who are risking their lives each day. I cried for the grocery store employees who are now first responders. Then I paused again to breathe and continued crying. I cried for my students who are living in homes where their families don't like each other. I cried for my students who are working in grocery stores. I cried for all the people who have lost their jobs and who will lose their jobs. I cried for my fellow teachers who want to teach our students back in the classroom and not on a screen. I cried for all the parents who are doing their best. And then my kind, gracious husband, who had woken up and come into the kitchen to find me crying, put his arms around me and reminded me, we can remake breakfast together. All right, so my hope is, these are I'm throwing these out to the university's dreams, right? That I'm going to publish this book about my students from Norfolk, and then I also have been working for years and years. I have journals upon journals from teaching with student profiles and things that I want to talk about what's happened over the decades in our public schools. And so I wrote a couple of, I'm going to call them glimpses of a couple of my, I'm going to say it, favorite students. We're not supposed to say that, but there's the reality is we all have some. And I realized that I've taught 4 generations of students, which is really quite wild to me. And so I'm just going to, for time's sake, read 2 of the profiles that are about 2 of my students that are here, former students, Carly and Jeff. So I know you love being put on the spot, Jeff. Again, these are just short little paragraphs, but just to give you kind of a idea. So, Jeff, what does a teacher do when she realizes that the student in front of her just might be smarter than she is? Well, that is what I thought when I first met Jeff. He was a sophomore, I believe, freshman, in our Journalism 1 class. Jeff, too, is arguably, like most of us, an old soul or an old man, for the fact that in class he constantly would share how bad his knees were, despite being recognized as the stellar golf player in Massachusetts in high school golf. He was also one of the best writers I had taught in a long time. There is an intensity about Jeff that is admirable, along with a bit of cynicism, a lot of sarcasm, and a passionate heart. Jeff was my first journalism student ever to earn the spot of co-editor of our school newspaper as a junior. So, in high school, Jeff was known as an awesome golfer, a wicked smart kid. And then, one of my proudest teaching moments, seeing Jeff share his hidden talents with our school, playing the guitar and singing. One of my favorite memories is seeing and hearing Jeff play and lead a crowd of students in, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, because I could be, I Want It That Way by the Backstreet Boys. So, Carly, who's sitting next to Jeff, what I loved about Carly, and what I still love about her, is that she is that person, that student, who I could look out to in a sea of teenagers who might not have been paying attention. And she would be looking at me, nodding in agreement to whatever I was speaking, whenever I was. And that is just such a gift to us teachers, right? You're like, someone is listening. I could look at her when a kid was acting out, and she would look at me with a look of empathy empathy, sympathy, as well as laugh, validating my feelings that I was wondering if I was teaching a class or the ringleader of a circus. Carly, although known for being a student athlete as well, she went on to play soccer in college at Holy Cross, needs to also be known for her intelligence. She comes from a large family who often makes fun of her. So I want to say publicly here, Carly is a very smart person and empathetic and so fun. I could go on and will when my book is published. And guess what? For those of you who don't know, Jeff and Carly met in our Journalism 1 class, and this past October got married. And I'm honored to say that I was a witness at their wedding. So thank you, and thank you both for coming tonight. Appreciate that. What'd you say?
I said, wouldn't miss it.
Wouldn't miss it. Thank you, Carly. All right, and so we have one more poem that we're going to read, and then we'll open it up for questions, comments, etc. And so this poem, Nanaya and I wrote together. And here, we're going to just stand out here just so we can be more together. And as you can tell from generations, Nanaya reads seamlessly off of her phone. I could never do that. I'm like, I have it up here for my time. And so I have my hard copy again, right? Okay. So let's see here. So this is a list poem, and we wrote it, and it's for all of us white teachers.
In Massachusetts in 2022, 87% of teachers were white, while 46% of the students identified as people of color.
How to teach a young black woman in 10 lessons. 1, don't. At least not in the traditional whitewashed way. You instead guide, teach, and provide opportunities, many opportunities, for her to use her voice.
2, fact. For more than 100 years, black women have led America's progress on human rights, fairness, and empowerment.
3, for your student, create a safe space for her to talk and to listen, to create and to analyze, to reflect and to grow.
4, even if it makes others uncomfortable, I will love who I am. Janelle Monáe.
5, and please, for God's sake, do not make your student represent all black women, for she is her own person.
6, no matter where you are from, your dreams are valid. Lupita Nyong'o.
7, provide many examples of representation, but do not present only stories of black women who struggle. Share many stories of black women who are thriving despite the continued oppression in the U.S. and in the world.
8, and therefore, do speak of Phyllis Wheatley, Amanda Gorman, Michelle Obama, Kamala Harris, Bell Hooks, Zendaya, Viola Davis, Shonda Rhimes. Shall I go on?
9, do embrace your student for the incredible human being she is, worthy of love and belonging just for being born.
10, do acknowledge and do celebrate that the young black woman has become the student, has become the teacher as I stand in my power using my voice to tell my truth.
So thank you. We want to open it up now to questions and comments, and feel free to ask us anything about process or experiences, anything of that sort. So whoever would like to go first, please feel free to open it up. And I promise Skip, who's the executive director, that former students would ask questions and that we're a room full of educators, so. Pressure. Yes, pressure.
Can't you just call on people like you are?
I could. Cold call.
Sticks with our names on them?
Yes, right. Any comments or questions for Nanaya or myself or both of us?
I loved all of what I heard tonight.
Thank you.
Nanaya, your poem America was just from start to finish, just especially that last line. And last lines really drive a poem home for me. And a comment for you, Kathy, consider Remake Breakfast Together as a possible title. Because that was really
I like that. I like that. Thank you.
So thanks, guys.
Thank you.
What's next on the tour?
Right. Well, so we will be in Uxbridge Public Library
Yeah,
on the
on the
27th. And then you'll see on social media, there will be dates throughout the year that we will be having other poets. And I kicked off, this is the third year, correct me if I'm wrong?
This is the third.
Yeah, the third year. And we, at the Shauna Foundation, are committed to public libraries, as we know. And school libraries. I think we could make maybe a stop or two for alum. But as you taught me many, many years ago, right, that libraries are a pillar of democracy. It's so important today, for sure. So, yes, yes.
Yeah.
So we'll be continuing to do that. Yeah. Yes. Someone else, I thought Jeff?
How did you like develop a passion for poetry, and also from there, when did you go from maybe just writing it privately to performing it? What was that like?
That's a really good question. So my older brother, Kofi, was a poet. He
Jeff knows.
worked directly with Miss Anita and Miss Kathy, and I remember stumbling upon a poem, Angry Black Woman by Portia. And she was also my brother's coach, and we just recently saw her last month.
Yes, she's the former poet laureate of Boston.
It was really cool, and for a very long time, I mean, I loved music, I loved singing, and words have a lot of power. We all know that, and I kind of sat to myself in middle school, and I was feeling many things at the time that I wasn't able to understand, and I thought, maybe if I write it out and see it in front of me, that would help. And so that's kind of how my poetry started, and it wasn't until 2020 that I was comfortable enough to start sharing my poetry, and it's gone up from there.
What was hard was the pandemic, right? So, our poetry club, poetry team wasn't able to perform like so many years before. So what I'm grateful for is that you hung on to your passion and now have the opportunity to use your voice. Yes, for sure. Yeah. Someone else? Questions?
And I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead, Roy, you go first. And then...
I just was wondering, how do you feel about your poetry? Your message certainly is strong, and does that give you any, I don't know how to word it maybe, but how does that make you feel? Does it give you any more
Comfort,
strength?
Yeah.
Yeah, like you need a direction.
Yeah,
Is this
for
helping
sure.
you with the direction to channel how you're feeling?
Definitely, and in recent times, things have definitely been rough, and to not only be a black woman, but to be a daughter of an immigrant, there are many things that have really put a lot of things into perspective for me, and so writing The Mediocre White Guy in like January was something that really helped me process, for sure.
And do you have opportunities, I mean, obviously going around and doing this is opening people's eyes, but I'm just thinking what a good mentor you would be to somebody back in the your middle school self.
Yeah.
Because you look around and like you said, there isn't, you're looking at a white faculty, you're looking at no outlet, or very few outlets to really share all that with. And I think certainly young people need that, and we need to do better by it. But, it hasn't really changed, but I'm thinking that you would be a great mentor.
Well, thank you.
I know, and this is a shameless plug for the Shauna Foundation. But one of the reasons why when Anna and Skip asked if I wanted to come on board, one of the reasons why I totally wanted to was because of their encouragement and push to have underrepresented voices represented. And so that's why I'm so excited, and I was willing to kick off the poetry tour this year, because we do need, exactly what you're saying, to uplift so many people, young people's voices who can mentor, and then have, that middle school girl or boy say, oh my gosh, I can do this too. Yeah, sure. Caroline?
No, I wanted to say just how
beautiful and vulnerable the two of you were up there, and amazing, the messages, and just, you know, intentional and, you know, and purposeful each one of those were. So I just wanted to thank you for that. And also kind of wanted to hear about that process for that poem that you wrote together, which I think is super interesting and cool that you really, you know, you co-wrote that, and how that experience was like for that. You want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I mean, sorry. A lot of the time, Miss Kathy and I bounce ideas off of each other. Like, sometimes I'll be like, I don't really know how to finish off this poem, and I was wondering if you had any ideas. And when I first got presented with this opportunity, she was like, do you think we should write a poem together? And I was like, oh, definitely. But what would we talk about? And she went, we could talk about our relationship as teacher and student to now equals and friends. And I was like, that sounds really cool, but how would we write it? And slowly but surely it started to come together, and it's definitely it's my first collab poem, but I'm definitely open to writing more with you.
Thank you.
You are my favorite writing partner, for sure.
Thank you.
Don't tell Kofi.
Thank you, and thank you, Caroline, for sure. Yes, yeah, we decided that we really needed to, it would be really important. Hopefully what's come through tonight is my passion as an educator is to build community and connection and to uplift young people and highlight their strengths and what I'm grateful for is that staying in touch with students, and I think just about everyone here has stayed in touch with former students because that whole mentorship that you were talking about, Lori, for sure. And so, and something that I really, for myself, and I reflected with many of you on, is as a white educator, how do I navigate space and provide opportunities? And it's that flip of use white privilege for good, even though I'm, you know, not excited to have it, but also have used it as well, right? And so that's something I really appreciate, is that Nanaya and I have transcended, right, into humanity, but also really want to model for people, right? And get vulnerable, like you were saying, Caroline, with each other, and to do so. And I've watched many other educators model these critical relationships with one another, right? Because often education is the microcosm for the bigger world. And so, and that's where we're supposed to be learning and navigating, negotiating. So that's where it came to that. Other questions or comments? Jen?
So I just wanted to, it's not really a question or a comment, but I just really appreciated the way you both are using poetry as a means of political expression, and was struck, Kathy, by your story about your anonymous poem going viral and the way that you're using poetry subversively, you know, to change culture. And I've, in these chaotic times, I've been just finding myself turning to poetry in the morning for like grounding and resilience and courage. And I think it is it is a way to connect kind of mind to mind, heart to heart, change perspectives with power and emotion. And I just want to applaud you for that courage, the vulnerability and courage to use this medium for political change and culture change, and I'm inspired by you. Thank you.
Thank you. And I agree, and we've talked about this a little bit, Jen, before, that where we are in this chaotic times, to use your word, I found myself like going back and forth, and we've talked about this, about feeling like waves of depression and anxiety, right? And so how do you navigate that? And I keep coming back to like doing the next right thing, taking one step forward, being kind, and then how can we use our voices in a way that is sharing our message. And so poetry has been that way to do that. And I did feel like being in Norfolk was a little bit of Dead Poet Society meets Shawshank Redemption, and I don't mean to minimize that experience. It's more to like uplift it in that way. And so I did help one particular man self-publish a book, again subversively, and then have heard from lots of former students through email correspondence, etc., sharing their words and wanting them to get out. And there's lots of great institutions like Harvard that are doing this type of work and wanting to lift up, again, underrepresented populations, both in the prison system but also without too. So, thank you. Anyone else? Yes, Joanna.
I just wanted to applaud you both, and what a beautiful presentation. I was thinking about when the student is ready, the teacher appears, and here you are, you found each other, and you became the light for each other, and after walking in this room and being absent for 18 years because I retired, and seeing all the faces I traveled, I'm really reminded that it's, in many ways, it's alive and well and thriving. And I was particularly moved by your pathetic white guy.
Oh, the mediocre white guy.
I like that.
And that was so articulate, you know, that was so wonderful. And Kathy and I share our poetry too, and so it was just wonderful to hear how you had crafted this poem together, you know, and what a testament, you know, to freedom, to democracy, to I'm always struck, and I want to go clap when I see a parent say to their little child, use your words. And you are just a glowing example of using your words. So thank you. Standing ovation.
Yes, thank you so much. Yes.
I was just wondering, out of the poems you've shared, which ones are your own personal favorite for each of you?
I'd have to say the mediocre white guy. Because it was my first open mic. Miss Kathy, she was like, hey, there's an open mic happening at this restaurant. I was wondering if you want to go. And I was like, yeah, sure. And you know, I was not planning on even standing up at a microphone that night. I was just planning to sit there and watch. And with the encouragement of Miss Kathy and Miss Steph, I decided to perform a poem, and it was like the weirdest thing because there was music like booming. I'm sitting there, we're looking at each other just talking. This guy, okay. He comes up to me, he lays down, he's like, you know, I just want to say your poem, you know, it was so beautiful, and you know, I have my own Mount Rushmore of black women. And I was like, Miss Kathy, what's going on? Miss Kathy, what's happening? And I'm gonna be so honest, I blocked it out for a really long time. I was just like, I don't know what's going on, so I'm just gonna nod and smile and wave, you know, like the penguins from Madagascar, and hopefully he leaves. And then he did, and we just looked at each other and we were like,
Yeah, what was that?
what was that?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And taking a troublesome experience, for lack of a better word, and you wrote about it. And yeah, absolutely. For me, I think, well, I wrote AAA tow truck driver years ago, and so that's just always been like a defining kind of profile for me. But I'm really liking the ones that I've written about being in Norfolk. And I have several more that hopefully we'll get into a book and talking about it. And so, yes, probably perception is not reality. I really like. So, And a lot of people do like the sugar plums and motherfuckers because they like hearing me swear. Many people say that, and I'm like, oh my God, like I didn't know
As a
that.
former student, I can attest, I did
I know
burst out
you
laughing.
did. The first time I read it.
You know what, Kathy, I've known you for a long time, and it rolls off your tongue so much more.
She's been holding it in.
Yes, yeah. I think probably working in Norfolk too, it just was very, yeah, it was, yeah. Yeah, it's funny because several people have said to me recently, like, who don't know me very well, and they're like, you must be like the most badass person. I don't think anyone's ever tried me like that. Like, no, but what reality is not perception. But I do think being authentic and going into a place that, you know, maybe others would be scared of, etc. Like I said, I found it to be such a transformational experience as well, and it was one of those teacher becomes a student, just like here. So, yeah.
That's another possible title for the collection.
Oh, that's right. About the teacher becomes a student? Is that what you're saying?
No, sugar plums and motherfuckers.
Oh, that could be one of the
They'll probably sell more.
Yes, would you say
They'll
there
probably
was?
sell more.
Yes.
It
That
would certainly pick up
Yeah,
the
people
shelf.
will remember it.
Yes.
Like,
Oh, sugar plums, motherfuckers.
Yeah,
I wonder who that's by.
Exactly. Anything else as we wrap up? We're so appreciative of all of you coming out tonight for this hour.
I just have to say, I've never seen you look happier.
Oh, thank you, Daryl. Thank you. I am. Yeah, I think that I feel really grateful for this point in my life and the writing and the collaborating and connections for sure. Yeah, thank you. Anyone else?
Yes, you transformed your prison experience into something quite wonderful when you talked about the blackbird and you were waiting to see something grow. You know, well, I'm seeing it grow for both of you. So,
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. So, yeah. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
If you want to see us come out again on the 27th, we'll be doing the same thing. But I do know there's a few former students who are coming that night that I'll read little excerpts from them. But again, thank you for coming out. All right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes.